Yirmiyahu who was a prophet, was a good chaver of mine. Never understood a single word he said, but we helped him to drink his yain. And we always have some mighty fine yain. Singing simchat le'olam, kol ha'yeladim now. Simchat to the dagim in the deep blue sea. Simchat to you and me.
Welcome to the Haftarah Plethora video Zoomcast, where we do our best to bring a little joy to the world by talking about the prophets and their writings that are read every week. And we're back to our favorite prophet, Jeremiah, who inspired our selection of theme song, our frog avatar.
And your love of wine.
Well, I won't credit Jeremiah for my love of wine, but like Jeremiah, the bullfrog, I think it's important to always have some very fine wine and to have some good friends to share it with. So here's my very fine wine, again, a port this morning. And here's my very good chaver, Rick Muller, the king of cannellation. How are you doing, Rick?
It's not so easy to share your wine through the computer, but I'll definitely share your friendship. Dr. Larry Herman, the head economic honcho of Haftarah.
Well, I don't know about the head economic honcho business, but I thank you for the compliment, Rick. It seems like it's been forever since we talked about a new Haftarah.
It does, but it's good to be back as we pick up the few Haftarot that we haven't yet covered.
Right. And now we've covered more than 60 separate Haftarot. And by my count, after discussing the Haftarah for Bahar from Jeremiah today, we'll only have 23 more to go.
Boy, how many of those are regular Shabbat morning Haftarot and how many are holiday special Haftarot?
Well, 14 of them are holiday Haftarot, and we'll soon be knocking off at least one for Shavuot. 7 are regular Haftarot that we missed for one reason or another. Some of them are rarely read. And 2 are alternative Sephardi versions. But we'll get to them. We'll get to all of them one of these days.
Let's plan to get to them before Millie's bat mitzvah.
Oh, for sure. Long before. But thanks for the segue into Millie time.
What's that girl up to?
Well, she loves playing the piano and guitar, and Diane is working with her on art. But she mainly loves to play. Diane sets up a water fun park for her, and she loves to splash.
You don't like getting wet?
Well, I do, but my main thing is taking her to the park to swing. She loves that most of all.
I thought you were working your way up to roller coasters and skydiving with her.
In good time, Rick, in good time. Meanwhile, we did have a nice outing for Mother's Day. Millie enjoyed herself with her mother and her 2 grandmothers.
With all the attention you pay to Millie, poor Billy must be jealous.
Not really. Billy gets lots of attention too. But let's get back to Jeremiah. Rick, the Haftarah for Bahar is something of a strange story.
Hey, aren't most of them?
True, but in today's Haftarah, Jeremiah is in prison.
What did he do? Drink too much wine? Public drunkenness?
Perhaps, but his real crime was that he prophesied that Jerusalem would fall and that King Tzidkiyahu would be exiled to Babylonia.
Which turned out to be true.
Yeah, but Tzidkiyahu didn't take it too kindly. You know what they say about shooting the messenger?
Or in this case, imprisoning the prophet.
Exactly. So here is Jeremiah sitting in prison, waiting for Nebudhanezer to arrive and conquer Judea, when God speaks to him. And does God instruct him how to stop the impending attack, or how to help the people prepare, or even just to console Jeremiah? No. God tells him that he'll be visited by his cousin Hanamel, who apparently has somehow used his land to pay a debt and is trying to get it back, and who needs Jeremiah, his cousin, to redeem his land.
Talk about rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Exactly my point, Rick. Now, this is a subject that we read about in the Torah portion for Bahar. We're taught that if a relative is forced to sell part of his land, his relatives are obliged to redeem it for him.
Okay, so that explains the connection between the Haftarah and the Torah reading. But Jeremiah was just following the law. Good man, right?
Indeed, good man. But don't you think it's a little strange that this is taking place in prison and that it's happening at a time when the bigger issue of the day was the looming attack by the Babylonians?
Well, life goes on, you know, like the Beatles. Ob-La-Di Ob-La-Da, life goes on, brah. La la ha la, life goes on. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the message, or at least one of them. No matter how dismal things may seem, you got to keep fulfilling even your most mundane obligations.
I like that drash, Rick. In any case, we have a detailed description of the transaction, including the payment of the money, 17 shekels of silver, the writing of the deed, the witnessing of the transaction, and the depositing of the documents into an earthen jar for safekeeping.
17 shekels, huh? Land was cheap. Wish I could find a deal like that.
Me
too. I think it's all about that piece of parchment, the deed. Just like Abraham buying the cave of Machpelah, he wanted it in writing with witnesses so no one could contest it later. And he wanted to make sure that the proof of the transaction was preserved. Our people learn to get things in writing and preserve the records.
Another interesting point, Rick. We also have reference to the scribe Baruch, son of Neriah, who apparently was Jeremiah's friend, disciple, and secretary. Some think that he was responsible for writing down the prophecies of Jeremiah. He's also reputed to have written a book of his own that did not make it into our Bible. But the book of Baruch is included in some versions of the Christian Bible or the biblical Apocrypha.
Maybe we can talk about that after we finish all the Haftarot.
I'll put that on my schedule. In any case, after completing the mitzvah of redeeming his kinsman's land, Jeremiah launches into a long questioning of why God commanded him to carry out this duty at this time of great danger to the people.
Like I said, life goes on.
Good answer, but not the one that Jeremiah accepts. He recognizes that God is all-powerful. He seems to be wondering why God is so concerned with this apparently minor mitzvah when the people are being punished for their sins. Why isn't God protecting them from the Babylonian aggressors? If God is so powerful, he could stop the invasion.
Okay, so what's the answer?
The answer comes in the final two verses of the Haftarah, when God tells Jeremiah that nothing is too wondrous for God's power. In other words, if Jeremiah and the people would only focus on carrying out God's commandments, no matter how seemingly small and insignificant, such as redeeming a kinsman's land, then indeed God will use his power to protect them. It's just that we and Jeremiah cannot know when or how that will take place.
In other words, you do your job and God will do his job.
Bingo! If Jeremiah will do his duty to redeem his kinsman's land, God will do his job of redeeming the people.
And now it's time for me to do my job, discussing the trope.
Indeed, Rick. We're reading from chapter 32 of Jeremiah, starting with verse 6. Let's divide the reading as follows. We'll start with verses 6 through 15, which describes Jeremiah's redemption of Hanamel's land. Then verses 16 through 22 is where Jeremiah describes God's power. This is also the place, after verse 22, where the Sfardim end the Haftarah. In verses 23 to 25, Jeremiah questions why God seems to be ignoring the Babylonian threat and instead focuses on this seemingly minor obligation of redeeming his kinsman's land. And finally, in verses 26 through 27, we get God's answer.
Okay, I can work with that. So the first section has a lot of interesting trope, including two pazers, the first of which appears in verse 8, which is loaded with trope. The pazer is on the word Eli, Vayomer Eli, to me, is what Eli means. In fact, it's the second time this word appears in the pasuk, the first time with a relatively rare Talisha Gedolah, and both times it's followed by a Kadma V'Azla. So the verse begins, Vayavo Eli, Hanamel ben Dodi, and then the verse continues, Vayomer Elai Kinena Et Sadi Asher Banatot. So the similarity of the pattern is remarkable, noticeable. Why two special trope on such a small word, Elai, which means to me, just a preposition. Jeremiah is relating what happened, and he says, Hanamel, my cousin, came to me, just as God said, and he said to me. And what does he say to Jeremiah? Please buy my land, my field. Note that Hanamel didn't shout it out for everyone to hear. He just said it privately, personally to Jeremiah. Families have to stick together and take care of each other. I think that's one of the important lessons here.
I like that, Rick. You're on a roll. Can I also note that the Dargat Tavir in that same verse is on the words Mishpat HaYerusha, the right of inheritance, which is the main theme of the Haftarah, and so gets some emphasis there.
Yep, yeah, that's right too. And the second pazer, which is in verse 14, is where Jeremiah explains to his buddy Baruch how to deal with the documentation. Now we know that something very important is coming up here, since the verse begins with Ko Amar Adonai Tzvaot, the usual formula for prophetic announcements. So thus Adonai Tzvaot is a saying with a Tilisha Ketana Kadma V'Azla Kamba, your favorite. And what's so important, like I said, we have a history of careful documentation of our land purchases. Here the pazer is on the word ha'eleh, which means these, seemingly insignificant word, but it's telling us that these documents are important, the deed and all the accompanying proof of purchase. So I think it calls to mind our people's emphasis on literacy, writing, reading, paying attention to detail.
Rick, we are indeed a people who pay attention to details. And one of those details is the way that we use the trope, not only to chant the Torah and Haftarah, but also we can use them to interpret it, just like you do and are doing here. To the best of my knowledge, that's unique among the religions that rely on sacred texts.
I don't know if it's unique, but it's a definite feature. And here's another example. There's a second Ko Amar Adonai Tzvaot in the very next verse, verse 15. But this one has a much more subdued kind of trope, Mercha Tavir and Mercha Tipcha combination. It's in this verse that God announces that houses, fields, and vineyards shall again be purchased in the land.
A note of optimism, telling us calmly that there is a future in the land, regardless of the calamity that seems about to occur. I like that, Rick. Time to chant, though. The Haftarah is found on page 750 of the Eitz Chaim Chumash, or our viewers can follow along on their screens thanks to Norm Gar's wonderful text.
Sorry,
Rick,
that's 759, sir.
Oh,
759, yeah.
Sorry about that, 759. In any case, start off with the bracha.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Vayomer Yirmiyahu haya dvar Adonai elai lemor hine Hanamel ben Shalom dodcha ba'elecha lemor kinelecha et sadi asher banatot ki lecha mishpat hageula liknot vayavo elai Hanamel ben Dodi Kidvar Adonai El Chatzar Hamatara Vayomer Elai Kenena Et Sadi Asher Banatot Asher Beretz Binyamin Ki lecha mishpat hayerusha ulecha hageula kinelach va'eda ki dvar Adonai hu va'ekne et hasadeh me'et Chanamel ben Dodi asher banatot vayeshkala lo et hakesef shiva shkalim vasara hakasef vayechtov basefer vaechtom va'aed edim vayeshkol hakesef b'moznayim Va'ekach et sefer hamikna et hechatum hamitzvah vehachukim ve'et hagalui va'eten et hasefer hamikna el Baruch ben Neriah ben Machseah le'enei Chanamel Dodi Ule'nei ha'edim ha'kotvim b'sefer ha'mikna le'nei kol ha'yehudim ha'yoshvim b'chatzar ha'matara v'atzaveh et Baruch le'neihem le'mor Ko amar Adonai Tzvaot Elohei Yisrael Lakoach et hasfarim ha'ele et sefer hamikna hazeh ve'et hechatum ve'et sefer hagalui hazeh Untatam bichli chares lema'an ya'amdu yamim rabim ki cho amar Adonai Tzvaot Elohei Yisrael od yikanu vatim v'sadot uchramim Ba'aretz hazot.
Very nice, Rick. Rick, I note that the trope are less dramatic in the next set of verses 16 through 22.
Yeah, but Jeremiah gets stronger in verse 17. He starts off with an onomatopoeia word used as an interjection, aha, with a rare zarka. The entire verse is powerful. Aha, Adonai Elohim, Hine ata asita. And following, go ahead.
So it means, aha, Adonai Elohim, you made heaven and earth with your great might and outstretched arm. Nothing is too wondrous for you. What a great pasuk.
Yeah, and if you like that one, you're going to love verse 18. It has echoes of the 13 attributes of God from Ki Tisa with the words Oseh, Chesed, Lalafim, and then foreshadows the Avot section of the Amidah we all know, Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagibor, in the second half.
Very evocative. How about if you evoke the chanting of verses 16 through 22?
Va'et palel et Adonai achrei titi et sefer hamikna el Baruch ben Neriah lemor aha Adonai Elohim hine ata asita et hashamayim v'et haaretz B'chochacha hagadol uvizroacha hanetuya lo yipale mimcha kol davar oseh chesed lalafim umshalem avon avot elchek b'nehem אחריהם האל הגדול הגibor Adonai צבאות שמו גדול העצה ורב העליליה אשר עיניך פקוחות על כל דרכי בני אדם לתת לאיש כדרכיו וכפרי מעלליו אשר שמת אותות ומופתים בארץ מצרים עד היום הזה ובישראל ובאדם ותעשה לך השם כיום הזה ותוצא את עמך את ישראל מארץ מצרים באותות ובמופתים וביד חזקה ובעזרוע נטויה ובמורא גדול ותיתן להם את הארץ הזאת אשר נשבעת לאבותם לתת להם ארץ זבת חלב udvash.
Very nice. Rick, in verses 23 to 25, Jeremiah gets down to the point. The people didn't follow God's teaching or commandments. God caused this misfortune. And then Jeremiah specifically identifies the threat to Jerusalem from the attackers. From the attackers, famine, disease. Verse 25 is a cry of outraged disbelief, according to Robert Alter. In light of the comprehensive disaster now enveloping the city, how can God concern himself with the inconsequential matter of a land sale?
Well, I think the trope helps us a little bit. We start off with an Azla Geresh, very dramatic, at the beginning of verse 23, on the word Vayavo'u. Vayavo'u. Our ancestors came to take possession of the land, which maybe helps us understand the importance of Jeremiah redeeming his cousin's land. And Alter's comment about verse 25 being a cry of outraged disbelief is supported by the Gershaim on the opening word of the Pasuk, Ve'ata, and now.
And now? All right, and now, Rick, chant verses 23 to 25.
Vayavo'u, vayirshu otach, velo sham'u vekolecha, uvtoratcha lo halachu, et kol asher tzivita lahem la'asot lo asu batakre otam e kol hara'a hazot hine hasolelot ba'u ha'ir lelochtach v'ha'ir nitna beyad hakasdim הנלחמים עליך מפני החרב והרעב והדבר ואשר דיברת היה והנך רואה ואתה אמרת אלי אדוני אלוהים K'nei lecha hasadeh b'kesef v'ha'ed edim v'ha'ir nitna beyad hakasdim. Okay, we come to two brief final verses, but they represent the punchline. Like the last actor comes on the stage to tell the moral of the story, like in the Greek tragedies. It's God himself.
Rick, I love how the final verse starts. God seems to be exasperated with Jeremiah. He says, "Look, man, I am Adonai, God of all flesh."
Exactly. And then we have an unusual form of a word and an unusual use of a relatively common trope on the word hamimeni, which literally means from me, with an implied question on the front of it in the prefix, the hey there, the ha. But the trope is a rare lone zakef katon, which places the emphasis on this word.
I like that. It tells us that we should read the end of the verse as, "Is anything too wondrous for me?" with a big emphasis on the me being God. Rick, take us home with the last two verses.
Vayehi devar Adonai el Yirmiyahu lemor. Hine ani Adonai Elohe kol basar hamimeni yipale kol davar.
Great ending, Rick. Great ending. As always, thanks to Norm Gar for all the beautiful graphics, the text, the editing, and the music. Don't forget to write us with your thoughts and comments. Our emails are below, and if you like our Zoomcast, please forward the link to your friends and family. We'll be reprising episodes for the next 2 weeks, but we'll be back just before Shavuot with the Haftarah Plethora for this special Shavuot Haftarah.
First day or second day?
Well, the second day is from Habakkuk, and it's the only time we read from him all year. But the first day is Ezekiel, so who knows? Maybe both. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbos.